Hello friends, today is Budapest. Budapest is a great destination in and of itself, but it's also a great hub from which to expand your travel. I'm going to start with the Gellért Hotel. I read about the Gellért Hotel in a novel and was determined to visit it. I did, loved it, and have been back many times. It is attached to a hot bath, like a Roman bath. One of a number of such baths in Budapest. Work began on building the Gellért Hotel, or Hotel Gellért, back in 1912, and construction was slowed down by World War I. And then in World War II, it was heavily damaged as well, so it's a survivor. And as I mentioned, there is the thermal bath, the spa, which is connected. You can put on your robe, which I believe they supply right in your room, and walk to the bath. And here you go. This is the bath here. Shocking in its beauty and luxury. This pool here sometimes features bubbles. It's a wave pool sometimes. And there are separate male and female dressing rooms. And this is the area, the main hall, off of which you get services like pedicures and salt scrubs and hot rocks. And this is where you would change. These are old school changing rooms, right? There are pools of differing temperatures, as you can see here. And there is a cold plunge. There's a charming small bar off to the side of the lobby, and a nice restaurant, at which I treated myself to some beautiful pea soup. I wouldn't have thought of pea soup as beautiful, but wait till you see the pea soup I got here. There you go. Delicious. I got 2 bowls. I had this one, and then I got another one. The breakfast at the Hotel Gellért is unbelievable. These photos do not really do it justice. It goes on and on. There are desserts, even. Stuff you would think of as dessert for dinner, included in breakfast. Pastries, the hot plates, the eggs, the meats. By far the best breakfast I have ever encountered anywhere, ever. And it's served in a sumptuous dining room with white tablecloths. The price of the Gellért is very reasonable. I think that part of the reason is that there is a smell of sulfur most of the time in most of the areas of the hotel. And that sulfur comes from the connected thermal spa. Here is a beautiful pastry shop and coffee shop. I spent some time in here, I'll tell you. Not so much for the pastries, which are exquisite beyond description, but for the atmosphere. You can have a coffee and a pastry, or you can have a beer. Look at those. It is old world. When you're in there, enough said. You don't need to say anything. You feel it. And it's not crowded, at least at the times I've been. It's never been crowded. Now here's an example of one of the pastries. I got one and took it upstairs. And I'm eating this in a little table and chair in the hallway on the floor where my room is. This is the view from one of the rooms I had. That's the bridge over the Danube River. The hotel is right on the banks of the Danube River. This is the hotel from the bridge. When you think about traveling, don't you kind of dream of that experience? I guess different people dream of different things. For me, that was really something. There's the bridge from another trip in the mist. Now, I mentioned that I had stayed in only one place other than the Gellért, and it was a hostel in the converted Ministry of something, finance maybe. And this is it. Can you imagine staying here for $40 a night? Well, actually, it's possible it was €40, depending on the exact date of that trip. Now we'll just show you some random images of the street and some architecture. It's a modern city, but it oozes old world from these surviving buildings. Now here's the Great Market Hall. And this is the oldest indoor market in Budapest. Back in 1896 or so, they opened this up. It was the mayor's idea. It was his biggest investment. This building was also damaged in World War II, and it remained damaged until the 90s. They did not fix it until the 90s. This is a fantastic spot to people watch. You can sit up in the upper level and look down and really get a wonderful view. And here is the building at night. It's right on the river also, and it's directly across the river from the Gellért Hotel. Now, this is the Keleti train station. There are other train stations in Budapest, but this one resonates with me. It seems to be the one I always end up at. And it embodies a real old world experience for me, an Eastern European experience for me. To me, you can't get more real deal than this. And I'm a train person, so I suppose I am biased when it comes to that. The very first time I came to Budapest, I was tired and I was foolish. I didn't venture far from the station. And so I left with an incomplete and not altogether flattering feeling for Budapest. But I did resolve at a later date to go back to all the cities that I didn't really like, because I thought I had probably not given them a fair shake, and that was true. And most recently, I met with a gentleman here who has a very impressive story, and we'll hear that story. Are you ready?
Go. My name is Ed Altman. I was born in Budapest in 1943. My parents fled from Hungary when the Russians came in. My father had a small bottle of poison. He said, if the Russians catch us, he'll feed it to me, a 1.5-year-old baby, my mother and himself. He was in the First World War in Bukovina on the Russian front, and he saw what Russians did to women and children. We escaped into Austria just in time for the bombing raids in Vienna. The parents dug themselves out of a bunker by the Opera House. Then my father got a job on a coal barge on the Danube, taking coal from Regensburg down to Linz, Austria. From 1945 to 1950, I grew up as Tom Sawyer on the Danube. 1950, we got a job, a sponsor in Cleveland, Ohio, and then we went to Bremerhaven and then to Cleveland, Ohio. I was able to come back in 1996 as an American lieutenant colonel, and I did some security work because there were some terrorist attacks at that time in Arabia, so the bases here needed to be looked at. They sent me to Schweinfurt, the base where I was a homeless, penniless refugee. I had a little gang when I was 6, just turning 7 at that time, 1950. We found a hole underneath the wall. We went outside after our parents fell asleep. Military police were going around and around. They never found us. Now, as I went there with my team of a major, a senior sergeant, and a number of civilians, a major came up and said, "Sir, let me brief you on our security." I said, "No, Major, let me brief you. I breached your security 51 years ago. We found the place where the hole was, but in 51 years the army had fixed it." Then we went to the central square where if your name was announced, you were saved. You could go to Canada, America, England, Australia. If your name was not announced, you had no future. One day the parents were whispering, but we kids heard them anyway. A Polish lady in her best rags went into the women's toilet, and because she was refused to enter to these countries, she smashed her head on the sink and committed suicide. Now I stood there where I was a homeless refugee as an American lieutenant colonel.
That's quite a story, and this is quite a guy. I did get to spend some more time with him on the train on the way to Novi Sad in Serbia. He went in a different direction after a while. I continued on to Novi Sad, but I feel very fortunate to have met him. By the way, here's another train to Budapest back in the early 90s during the Balkan War. And this is the view from the train I mentioned earlier from Budapest to Novi Sad. If you like the video, consider subscribing and remember to always travel lightly.